Today's episode is with Jesse Miller.
I think if you
Jesse is
want to
the
be successful in growing a team and scaling a business, you have to be creative. And number one, a personality test. But then on the technical side of things, I want to see problem solvers. Take client requirements and translate those into technical solutions. And so that's a transferable skill that you probably might not think about hiring for a cybersecurity compliance role.
How do you attract the right set of people
For them to bring in and pay an MSP, about one employee's salary, then they get a vCISO, they get a security team, they get all the tools, and they're able to actually build out an entire program. I think the first role you want to make is you probably want to hire a generalist who's business focused to get out of your lingo and speak to the lingo of the people you're talking to. And we want to be innovative. And so we want to position ourselves that when we come across an opportunity, we're able to take advantage of it. And the way we do that is by what are they doing wrong that they don't know is wrong, right? So they go out and say, well, if I get this, then I'll be secure. But there's no holistic view of why we're doing what we're doing.
You should opt for that rather than the cheapest way.
What's the actual ROI of the investment? Would you rather have 10 clients paying you $1,000 or 50 clients paying you $200?
Hi everyone, this is Purushottam, and thanks for tuning into ScaletoZero podcast. Today's episode is with Jesse Miller. Jesse is the founder of PowerPSA Consulting, a boutique firm that helps managed service providers build full stack operations for deploying services at scale. Jesse is recognized in the industry as an innovative thought leader, strategist, and operational powerhouse with an extensive information security and compliance background. His passion is helping organizations realize their maximum potential by providing them best in class cybersecurity and risk advisory services. Welcome to the show, Jesse. For our audience, do you want to briefly share about your journey? What interests you to get into cybersecurity?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here and chat with you today. And I think what we're going to get into is going to be really interesting for a lot of folks because we might touch on some topics that don't get talked about as much. But yeah, for me, people ask me that question all the time, and it's kind of a strange answer. I say my journey into cybersecurity was not a planned one. I would probably describe it more as a tumble down the stairs than anything else. So I started my career in carrier service operations and did that for many years. When the U.S. went through the economic downturn in 2008, that work dried up. So I went back to school as I had learned the Cisco command line and become very passionate about network engineering at the time. So went to school for that and then came out of school and got a job with a managed service provider as a network engineer. Quickly helped build that startup, became the director of infrastructure, was building cloud services, network as a service, doing software defined networks and all those kinds of things. And defending all of those services as a byproduct, because as you build these things, you have to defend them. So I was doing cybersecurity just more as, it needs to get done type of a thing, right? So in 2014, the ownership came to me and said, hey, we want to start a managed security service provider. Can you help us do that? You've been doing it. And so I kind of begrudgingly, to be honest, said, yeah, I guess we can kind of do it. We can do that. I really love network engineering, but we can do that. And started building out a managed security practice and got into security full time and just loved it. So it was interesting because I did it begrudgingly, but actually turned out to be the passion of my career, which is, like I said, very strange and providential the way those things came together. But brings us to today, helped grow that MSP to an 8-figure company and then transitioned out of there and started my own company helping other MSPs, managed service providers, vCISO firms, build out these extremely detailed operational blueprints to help them scale and deliver, really profitable, but yet virtuous cybersecurity services to their clients.
Love it. I love your journey because you did not plan for it, right? You stumbled onto it, and as you got into the cybersecurity, you started learning, and you loved it as well. So that is amazing. So if not a follow up, like a similar question is, uh, what does a day in your life look like today? I often ask this question to guests, and I get like very different answers. So I'm curious, how does your day look like?
So it can vary. I try to work in kind of blocks to just spread my time evenly. But what a day typically looks like is get up early. there's another interesting fact about me is we own a small farm. So I get up early, do my farm chores, feed the cattle, feed the chickens, and then head in for my hour of networking on LinkedIn. I do a post, interact with people, and get the kids off to school. And then by that time, my day actually starts. And so that can be a couple different things depending on what I'm working on. So I have a couple. We do have a vCISO practice as part of Power PSA that we allow our partners to resell. So it could be working with the vCISO
Mhm.
team to work through customer security requirements, risk assessments, things of that nature. There's also then the piece working with MSPs to do operational building of their programs. So it can include a range of different meetings with different client teams, vulnerability management, building a SOC, building out a vCISO practice, consulting services. So operational meetings to advise and strategize with my partners on those types of activities. And then there's the podcast that I'm recording with you today, so there could be some of that thrown in there as well. And then just some basic strategic discussions with executive leadership at different clients of mine. So those are it could be one, two, or all of those in any given day.
I can understand. Like as a founder, you would have to wear
Yeah,
multiple hats throughout the
yeah.
day, right? So I can appreciate that. And and thank you for doing the podcast. I'm interested to learn from your experience through
Yeah.
today's recording. One of the things that you highlighted, that you work with multiple
Hmm.
teams, right? You have a vCISOs team, you have your consulting practice,
Right.
and all of that, and which means you have either hired or you're working with them closely. You have built that
Hmm.
bond with them, right,
Hmm.
over time, and that is one of the topics that we
Yeah.
want to talk about today, right? How do you build your cybersecurity team, or how do you build that virtuous circle with your clients? So let's get
Yeah.
started. So hiring cybersecurity professionals is tough, and with the right set of qualities and
Hmm.
skills is very crucial for building like a comprehensive protection against
Yeah.
cybersecurity threats. So when you are hiring, let's say, what key qualities or skills that you look
Yeah.
for, and maybe any suggestion you have for organizations. And I would love if you can separate them between technical and
Yeah.
non-technical
Yeah,
qualities.
well, I'll start high level and say that I always want to hire for aptitude and attitude. So you don't have to know everything, and I think if you want to be successful in growing a team and scaling a business, you have to be creative in the way that you're looking for cyber professionals. Yeah, it's great to find the unicorn that has all the technical knowledge in the world, is good in front of customers, and works well on a team. But those people don't exist in large numbers. So I find that if you can find somebody that can communicate well and is good on a team and has the right attitude, you can train technical skills. And so I think that'll feed into some of the discussion we're having later on in the broadcast here. But in terms of looking for the right people, I think it's interesting. So I waited tables through college, and it's where I really learned how to get out of my shell and talk to people, right? Because I'm an introvert by nature. But if I realized very quickly that if I wasn't able to talk to people, I didn't make money as a waiter and a bartender, right? So I think it's always interesting when I find someone who says, "Yeah, I waited tables through college" or something like that. I think, hey, there's somebody that can get out and talk to people. But I think so. Number one, personality tests, making sure people have empathy
Hmm.
and are able to read into other people that way is important. But then on the technical side of things, I want to see problem solvers. It's interesting. I just was working with a woman who I was trying to get started in the industry, and she was a recording
Hmm.
artist and ran a studio in LA for many years and was transitioning into cybersecurity. Well, I've dabbled in music myself, and so I knew that somebody who knows how to run studio routing, audio routing, and build and use those applications has a lot of transferable skills for cybersecurity. So in any case, finally got her hooked up with a peer in the industry, a managed service provider, and she got the job. And so I'm really excited for her because I know that she's going to do very well in a compliance field because she's able to, as a studio and audio engineer, take client requirements and translate those into technical solutions. And so that's a transferable skill that you probably might not think about hiring for a cybersecurity compliance role, but it's if you think outside the box, you can find these diamonds in the rough and then really build them into a rock star for your team.
And one thing that I liked about your responses, you did not start with
Yeah,
technical skills. You started with sort of
yeah,
non-technical skills, right? Because like as you rightly highlighted, technical skills, you can train someone to learn about
Yeah.
networking or learn about infrastructure or cloud. But if you do not have the right attitude, then it doesn't help
Well,
anyone, right?
that's exactly
uh,
right. And now, I don't want to just you throw the baby out with the bathwater, right? And say that you don't need any technical skills and you get into cyber. No, if you're hiring
yeah,
for
yeah,
a high level, senior cloud engineer, you're going to need someone that knows Microsoft and AWS, right? But that's almost a commodity. If you're going for this job, you should know that stuff. What I want to see are people that have problem solving skills and teamwork skills, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah. I also want to highlight that I'm not saying that technical skills are
Right,
not needed, but I'm saying in terms of priority, it like the non-technical skills often uh, are more important than the
right.
technical skills. So yeah, I just want to
Yeah,
clarify
yeah.
that as well. So thank you for doing that. Now, a follow-up question to that is, how do you attract the right set of people so that they, let's say, look at your organization, or they are interested in joining your
Yeah.
organization? And another question, a similar question, is, let's say you have hired some cybersecurity experts, how do you retain them?
So I almost would say that those are the same question, and let me explain why. I think the way that you attract
Okay.
people is you create a culture of knowledge and of learning and of improvement, right? And that's the way you retain those same people. Because if you're attracting people that are go getters, people that are want to learn, want to be part of a team, want to be part of a culture of success and innovation, those people aren't going to be very happy if they get in the door and it's stagnant, right? So I think the way to attract top talent is number one, have a culture that's about forward progress for the employee. I don't know if you know radical candor, but I love the radical candor
Hmm.
concepts, and I'm building those into I think building using those to build a culture is really important. I think they say what is the word they say? Care personally and address directly. I might be getting that wrong, but um, yeah, and then investing in your employees, right? So I always say, if I'm talking about a security analyst, I have kind of a track that I've used that works really well to keep people sticky, and it's, you know, get your CompTIA Security Plus to show us that you're serious about security, and we'll pay for you to get your CompTIA CISA Plus, your CASP, um, do a Linux course, and then we'll pay for your SANS GCIH, right? So if an analyst goes through all those things, they're going to be pretty ready to rock in the sock at that point. And you're going to have spent some money, but then you also need to be
Hmm.
giving them bumps when they get those things. So you may spend 10, 20, even $30,000 to get that employee up to a level that is really executing well at a top level for your organization. However, I think doing that is going to really create stickiness with your employees, because where are they going to go and get that somewhere else? They're not. And if they do, I mean, you are going to have some attrition, right? But at the end of the day,
Hmm.
the large majority of employees are going to be grateful and are going to want to stick around because they know that there's more where that came from, right? So,
Yeah, I like how you connected both the worlds, right? Like pre-hiring and post-hiring, and you're right that they are the same in a way, right? The way you attract, you keep the
mhm.
same way. Like you build that culture where folks can learn and share and grow together as well. Um, so my next question is, let's say I'm running a startup. In that case, if I'm an enterprise, then I have the budget,
Yeah,
I have many people already there and
yeah,
stuff like that, or
yeah.
processes in place. If I'm a growing startup, what security roles should I hire first, and why?
Well, I'm probably biased, but I'm going to say you should hire probably a managed service provider. So I think
Okay.
outsourcing or hiring a company that can bring a lot of that team to you for a single price. I'm just going to go off on a little tangent here. I have a 15-person SaaS company who one of my partners brought on, and they were small, but they were a startup and were selling into Fortune 500 and Fortune 100 companies. And it came to light that they had lost $1 million in deals that year because they couldn't meet security standards for some of these larger clients. So for them to bring
Okay.
in and pay an MSP, about one employee's salary, then they get a VCSO, they get a security team, they get all the tools, and they're able to actually build out an entire
Mm-hmm.
program and then go win those
Mm-hmm.
deals. Now, all that aside, my bias aside, right? I think the first role you want to make is you probably want to hire a generalist who's business focused. because you need somebody to own those relationships on the other side of the house, but you need someone who can
Mm-hmm.
kind of herd the cats, so to speak, right? Take your vendors, take all those people, and start and align them with the business, and then look to strategically hire roles as you grow, right? So again, another client I'm working with, doing vCISO services, we're looking to start hiring. They have an internal IT team that has been doing a lot of security, but we're looking now to start hiring security analysts. But they're using our services.
Ah,
They're using our
nice.
services for the vCISO strategic part of that, right? Because they're
Mm-hmm.
they're blending those, and then we're hiring. I'm helping them hire security professionals who can actually execute some of the day-to-day technical items. And so I think you can then just stack on that as you grow. And what I always tell clients is I hope that you grow so much that, well, the last thing I help you do as your VCISO is hire your full-time CISO, right?
Makes sense. I must say that your your recommendation is slightly different than what
Yeah.
we have heard. Like the generalist that you
Yep.
highlighted,
Yep.
right? Because you need to build relationship with the other parts of the organization, and since you are small and growing fast, often there is
Yeah.
disconnect. So having that generalist who can do not just security but also build relationship, and then later on you hire very
Yeah.
dedicated roles, makes
Yeah.
a lot of sense.
Thanks.
So now the question is, let's say you hire
Mm-hmm.
someone, right? What KPIs would you set for them that which helps you understand that they are successful? Let's say for 3 months or 6 months or 12 months or even 24
Yeah,
months.
so I'm not a huge fan of KPIs, and that might come as somewhat of a
Okay.
surprise, being that I've worked for managed security or managed service providers, right? They're all about KPIs, right? So, but if we're talking about an internal team and an internal organization, it's a little bit different. If I'm talking about a SOC, I
Hmm.
want to say, is this analyst contributing and solving tickets against the average mean time of everybody else? What is their you know what does their rate look like for how much billable time they're billing? That's all managed services side of the house things, right? Now, for an employee though,
Hmm.
I internal employees, I like the idea of an OKR structure much better. So rather than KPI, I mean, you might have KPIs associated with your OKRs, but I like taking an OKR and saying, here's the problems that I want to solve or the things that I want to do with this employee. And that goes to that culture piece again, that link to the organizational goals, right? We're getting everyone rowing the same direction. And so I think an OKR structure is a much better way to measure employee effectiveness over
Um,
KPIs.
One of the things that you highlighted in the earlier response, like in terms of hiring the first role
Mm-hmm.
in a startup, is a generalist who can build
Right.
relationships and
Right.
stuff like that, right? And you have been helping businesses for years to build the robust
Mm-hmm.
cybersecurity teams. So, how can security teams engage with different business units so that they can understand their risks and tailor their security
Yes.
strategy? Let's stay with that security
Yeah.
startup
Yeah.
scenario, right? In a startup you hired a generalist. Now
Yeah.
how would the security team engage
Yeah,
with
I
others?
think, well, first and foremost, you need to learn to get out of your lingo and speak to the lingo of the people you're talking to. So, understand,
Language, yeah.
understanding that when people say things, when you say cyber risk, that's not really going to resonate. But when you talk about cash flow, that's going to make a lot more sense. So if we say, hey, we want to put these controls in place because we could have issues with cash flow if these systems are down for more than two or 3 days. People say, "Oh, that makes a lot of sense," rather than, "Oh, your cyber risk is high." What does that mean? So that's one piece, but then that's the negative piece of it, right? I think there's also a positive piece of risk is saying, again, speaking in the language of the business, we want to be agile and we want to be innovative, and so we want to position ourselves that when we
Hmm.
come across an opportunity, we're able to take advantage of it. And the way we do that is by putting XYZ controls in place, right? So I think those are two frames to keep in mind when you're talking with the other parts of the business. And then finally, just try to be helpful. So the old adage of the security department as the department of no, it should be, hey, how can I help you win deals? Would it be helpful for me to, we're going after a target vertical or a target industry or a target consumer. Well, how can I look at the regulations and the things that they worry about and then position our security program to answer some of those questions? I can tell you from being on both sides of the vendor DDQ discussion, due diligence discussion, right? when you go in and you start asking a vendor questions and they don't have good answers, and you're like, oh brother, here we go, they're a mess, but the business wants to use them. Well, if you can be that breath of fresh air on the other side of that and be like, yeah, here's what we're doing, here's how we're protecting ourselves, here's where we have some risk, here's how we're mitigating it. If you can do that and enable your business to be that breath of fresh air to their clients, you're going to position yourself as a business addition rather than detraction, right? In the eyes of the organization.
Yeah, yeah. And it was funny that when you mentioned that when security, it's often perceived as a team of
Right.
no, right? Is often seen as a
Mm-hmm.
roadblock. And I have seen in some meetings when you have invited a security engineer, and the moment they join, the whole atmosphere changes. Everybody starts looking at the security person as, yeah,
Yeah.
they will say no to whatever we say. So changing that is very
Yeah.
important. So yeah, I can totally
Yeah,
relate to
don't
it.
be dogmatic. Especially that's why I like the idea of a
Yeah, yeah.
generalist, or that's why you need VCSOs need to be business enablers. So if you go in with a plan
Hmm.
and the business says no, we can't do that because of X, Y, Z, don't be like, wow, pound your fist on the table. They're not being serious about security. Well, it's more of like, let's look at it from a different perspective. Okay, why don't they
Hmm.
want to do that? How can we creatively get around some of these impasses and maybe come at things from a different angle to try and enable the business while doing what I call good enough security, right? So that type of attitude will go a long
Hmm.
way with leadership and with the business.
Makes sense. Um, a follow-up question to that is, like, often when it comes to organizations, right, uh, they implement security practices, they triage security things and stuff like that. But when we speak with organizations, we still see that they make the
Yeah,
basic mistakes. I'm pretty sure you must have
yeah,
seen that as well. Like MFA is not enabled
yeah.
for root accounts or
Mm-hmm.
something like that. So, what are the top things that you have seen that organizations are still doing wrong? Let me put them into
Yeah,
different buckets, right? One thing that organizations are doing wrong and they don't know, they're not aware of it. One thing organizations are doing and maybe they're aware but are not fixing it. And then last one, which is a little controversial, which is one thing they know can go wrong but they think that they will not
yeah.
get caught and they will get away with it.
Yeah, let me try and parse those three out. So let's take the first one. What are they doing that they don't know? What are they doing wrong that they don't know is wrong? Right.
Hmm. Hmm.
I think I think not taking a risk centric approach from the start, and that's why I say, again, this is rampant in business and in the industry in general. Is they want to buy a tool or they want to hit the easy button, and they go out and say, well, if I get this, then I'll be secure. But there's no holistic view of why we're doing what we're doing. So I think
Hmm.
where I see them going wrong is like, yeah, like people, we want to do security. So we go out and we buy SOC as a service, or we go out and we buy vulnerability scanning, but we didn't think about having a vulnerability management team to actually fix the vulnerabilities, right? So buying these tools and not having a strategic plan in place for how they actually reduce the risk in the business aligned with the strategies of the business. So I think that's still a mistake I see made a lot on both the customer side and the service provider side. Um, yeah, the
Okay.
second one, what do we know is wrong, but we're still doing anyway?
Hmm.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting one. What do we know is wrong? Uh, I think maybe is doing things the same old way, right? So bear with me on this because I think we it goes back to being dogmatic about, hey, you have to do things this way. I see. Okay, let's take vulnerability management as an example. So I see vulnerability management. Oh, we gotta solve all highs and mediums, and that's what we do for our vulnerability management program. But are we using the EPSS to actually look at exploitability? Are we factoring in, are these assets
Yeah.
exposed to the internet? Do they have high value assets? Do we have a data study done to understand we might have assets out in the environment with tons of highs and mediums, but they don't actually have any super important data on them. So why are we focusing on those? Yeah,
The
the
context
context is
part.
huge for that. So I think we know
Hmm.
that. Everyone knows that, but it's hard in the sea in the whirlwind of the day to day to actually make those changes because it's kind of like turning an aircraft carrier. So it can seem insurmountable to make these changes. But again, what I'll say to that is slow, steady, and consistent, um, and small steps in the right direction will get you there. Yeah, the last one. What was the last one again?
The last one was one thing organizations are doing wrong, and they think they won't get caught or
Oh,
can
yeah,
get away with
yeah.
it in a way.
That's well, I think overstating their security posture, but with the SEC new rules, with the SEC new rules, we're seeing that that's kind of coming to an end, and I think we're going to see more regulation. Unfortunately, a regulation comes with its own set um, of problems, but yeah, but
Challenges
but I
and yeah.
think uh, yeah, I think overstating or kind of puffing up our chests, thinking we're not going to get caught, and using flowery language is still a real problem from vendors and customers in the industry, right? So yeah,
So I like the second answer really well when you said right, like the
hmm,
approach to
right,
security. Like I can relate to folks who were working, let's say, in the data center world and move to cloud. So if you look at cloud in the same way as you look at
right,
data center, then you are not doing justice to your
right,
security program,
right.
right? So you have to change the perspective when you come
Hmm,
to cloud. So similarly, that
yeah,
makes a lot of sense. Um, so one of the things at the beginning you said, right, that you have you work with many VCSOs, or you have a VCSOs group, you have the consulting, you work with
yeah,
many customers, and you one of the terms that you used is you build that virtuous circle with
yeah,
your clients, right? So I'm curious, like, can you explain what that
yeah,
means, and particularly in
yeah,
cybersecurity?
yeah. So let's 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 talk about what I see as a problem. So I see that, and this is coming from managed service providers and VCSO providers, organizations that are doing managed security for their clients. Typically,
Hmm.
there can be a disconnect where they're not focused on the right ideal client profile, the right vertical. And so they're, instead of value positioning their services, they're becoming price commodities. So clients line them all up next to each other and say, who's the cheapest? And they pick that one. So it's a race to the bottom at that point. So what is that? What happens there that is the opposite of a virtuous circle, right? Price and margin
Hmm.
is getting squeezed, so the idea is
Hmm.
that let's try to do the least we can while still meeting the requirements of the contract, because we got to keep the business profitable, right? So that the client is, we're doing just enough to keep the client not mad at us, right? And and I'm sure if you're listening
Yeah.
to this on both sides, you may have experienced this, right? But it can, and then morale goes down. Culturally, we're not innovative. We're not keeping the client's best interest in mind. It becomes a spiral. I call it the spiral of silos, right? So uh, but what a
Hmm.
virtuous circle is when we are focused on our ideal client profile, we're speaking to them, we're providing services that provide huge value for them, helping them be secure, and we're charging enough that we're getting paid well to do it. So I don't think anyone would say that you shouldn't get paid well if you're providing a valuable service. So the idea of a virtuous circle is
Hmm.
that we get paid well, and that's actually above average market value. We might be in the higher end of market value, but we get paid well, and we provide premium services to our clients who that helps protect them and helps position their organizations as leaders, innovators, and makes them overall sustainable and agile. We talked about that term, right? To weather the business storms and capitalize on market opportunities. And so we're enabling our clients to be better than they were yesterday while getting paid a fair wage to do it, so we can hire the best talent and have the best systems and have the best tools. And that is the virtuous circle.
And this sort of is very similar to what you
Yeah.
highlighted earlier, right? That it, instead of taking like a tool centric approach that you just bought a tool and you're secure, you should look at more of a
Right.
risk
Right.
centric approach. Similarly here, instead of buying the cheapest
Hmm.
tool available, you should see which is adding the
That's
most
right.
value. And even if you have to pay more, if you are getting more
Yeah.
value, your security posture is better, your security
Right.
program is better, you should opt for that rather
Right.
than the cheapest
What's the
availability.
actual
Uh,
ROI of the investment? Not how much does it cost, right? Yeah.
exactly. So you talked about it as important, and from from a organization perspective, if I'm a security vendor or I'm building a tool, how would that help me in my business outcomes? Building a virtuous circle,
Yeah.
let's say, with your customers or your clients or other
Yeah,
CISOs
let's put it
also.
this way. Would you rather have 10 clients paying you $1,000 or 50 clients paying you $200, right? You're going to be just as busy, you're going to be 5 times as busy making the same amount of money, or be able to really
Hmm.
focus on providing high value for your clients. And so I think anybody's going to choose the first, right? So that's the way I think you have to
Yeah.
think about it. Now, again, we can't look at this in a vacuum, right? We have to try and be profitable. We can't
Hmm.
be careless in the way that we structure our
Hmm.
organization. We want to do things to build internal efficiencies, build scale, and be able to take advantage of some of those economies of scale. That's why the SaaS model, the service provider model works. But we also don't want to be penny wise and pound foolish, right? Yeah.
Makes sense. Last question on security topics is, you are helping businesses in many different ways in building teams and building and maintaining relationships. What strategies would you recommend as CISO so that they can educate and empower their clients to make informed decisions when it comes to cybersecurity
Yeah.
investment?
Yeah, I think you have to have it's like the scientific method. You have to have a control. So let's talk about the technical and the personal
Okay.
part of it, right? So having a control. So whether that's a framework or some set of requirements, business requirements, or a combination of the two is probably the best way
Mm-hmm.
to go about it. That you evaluate
Mm-hmm.
services, technology, everything through that lens and do it the same across the board. That's how you're going to be able to start creating differentiators between different products and services and make more educated choices. Now, on the other side of things, I think, I heard this a long time ago, and I can't remember who said it to me, but they said, if you want to be successful as a CISO, invest in sneaker wear, right? So it goes back to that concept of reaching out and seeing how we can enable other business units and just be trying to be helpful. I think it's a simple
Mm-hmm.
it's a simple relational skill is to try and be a good listener and try and be helpful. And if you can do that, I think you're going to be miles ahead of your competitors or your peers in separate organizations.
And I think that applies to not just security, like to any and every field, right? You have to be a good
Yeah,
listener to sort of understand the pain that the other person
yeah,
is going through, or understand their
yeah,
requirements. And I think you touched on the word empathy right
yeah.
early on, and that is also a key attribute. Now, what are so CISO is in like the I think newest C level position now,
Yeah.
right? Like so, like CIOs and
Hmm.
CEOs and stuff like that. What advice would you give to, let's say, aspiring
Yeah.
CISOs or security professionals who want to build their career and build those
Well,
relationships?
I would first say make sure that you want to be a CISO and you actually know what that means, right? So
Mhm.
I own the domain. I plan to do something with it at some point, but I own the domain don'tbeaciso.com, right? And so it's my
Okay.
long term plan is to list out all the things that you're going to have to deal with as a CISO, kind of in a joking manner. Don't be a CISO if you don't want to deal with this. But so I think identifying what your skill set is and what your goals are for your career, because I think you can be a top individual contributor as like a senior architect or something like that, and you might for the person it might be a much better fit for what they want to do and what they really want out of their business career. So first identifying what you want to do, but then I think you have to focus. So picking a type, I think if you pick an industry or maybe a type of company that you would aspire to be the CISO for, and really start to learn about the business, um, understand their
Hmm.
world, understand how they make money, understand all those different pieces, those non-technical, oh, they are technical, but those non-security pieces that feed into the business because you're as an executive, and that's why I think the CISO role still has a long way to go to really be considered, equal in the executive realm of things.
Right.
Until we start acting like grown-ups, we're going to still be put at the kids' table, right? But that means understanding the business and enabling the business and thinking about how the business makes money first, not how do we have the best security controls,
Hmm.
but how do we have the good enough security controls to be able to allow us to be agile, effective, and safe while not breaking the bank and allowing the business to do what they need to do.
Yeah. So that makes a lot of sense because often what happens is when you You just want to be called as a particular
Yeah,
title, but you don't want to put in the
yeah,
hard work,
yeah,
right? And I'm glad that you made it clear that it's not that you just want to be called CISO, you have to put in the
yeah.
hard work as well. And I would love to see whenever you build that website where you can list out why you should not be a CISO.
Yeah, it's when I get some free time, whenever that is.
uh, yeah. So thank you so much for sharing your security knowledge and insights. That's the end of the security question section. Thanks, Jesse, for the lovely conversation. Here are a few important points which I gathered. First is create and practice a culture of knowledge, learnings, and growth. This not only helps you in hiring new security roles, but also helps in retaining them. Second one is for a startup, hire a generalist as a first role. This helps in building the trust and relationship foundation between the security and every other team, and this helps a lot in the longer term. The third and the last one is follow a risk centric approach rather than a tools based approach for building a security practice in the organization. Unless you have a solid security program, solid security team, just the tools doesn't make you meet your security goals. Thank you. Let's go to the second section, which is around rating
Mhm,
security practices.
mhm.
So the way it works is I'll share a security practice, and you should rate from 1 to 5, one being the worst and 5 being the best. And if you want to
Yep.
add some context why you are rating, giving a particular rating, that would you can absolutely provide that context also.
Okay. Okay.
So let me go to the first one. Conduct periodic security audits to identify vulnerabilities, threats, and weaknesses in your systems and applications.
Yeah. I would probably rate, although I don't know what else you're going to ask, I'm going to rate that as a 4 or a 5 for sure. Because, like I said, the whole piece of why I founded Power PSA and why I truly believe that we need to take a risk centric approach to the way
Mm-hmm,
we think about security. That's
mm-hmm,
exactly what we're talking about. Doing a risk assessment, having a framework, having a way that we identify and view and have a control group for what technologies and what things we want to do for our organization is huge, and it's an
mm-hmm.
integral part of that. So I would rate that a 4 or 5 for sure.
Okay. The next one is provide training and awareness programs to employees to help them identify and respond to potential security threats.
So I'm probably going to cause some problems with this answer, but I'm going to rate that low. I'm going to say like 2 or 3
Okay.
even.
I'm
So
curious.
yeah, so I don't think that doesn't mean it's not important, right? Yeah, I'm sure there's some people that are not going to be happy with that answer that I gave, but I do see it as something that has diminishing returns. So I think training, this goes back to culture, so if we don't have an organization, I think it's Maslow's hierarchy where it talks about people need to feel protected and feel safe before they ever think about innovation and things like that.
Mm-hmm,
I think if we don't have a culture that enables our employees to be innovators and they're worried about other things, just regular job anxiety, we're never going to have security no matter how much training we do. Now, if we
yeah.
have a culture that's focused on protecting the organization and likes the organization, likes where they work, security training is going to go a lot further. And so while I say I think security training should be done, I'm not saying it shouldn't be. I think that its importance in the grand scheme of things, I would rate it lower than so at least what you mentioned, right?
Okay. And I agree that it goes back to the culture, right? How your
Yeah.
organization is set up. If you are a security centric organization or security focused organization, these things provide you a lot of ROI versus a non security focused organization. So, yeah, it makes sense. The last one is develop and regularly test an incident response plan to help quickly detect, respond to, and recover from security incidents.
Yeah. Well, I think that would be a piece of training that I would think is very important, right? So that it's kind of like security training, but I think yeah, I'll rate that. I'll rate that higher. I'd say a 4 because yeah, I think that is not a day one thing. You need to
Hmm.
develop an incident response plan, right? But to test it and all those things, you need to first have a framework. You need to
Hmm.
understand what your risks are so that you can test against those scenarios. And you need to have some controls in place that you can actually test that control plan against. So yeah, I think that's really important. But I think developing the plan is one thing, testing it's another. And so, yeah,
Hmm.
I'd rate that a 4. Very important to have, but you have to understand that that's going to be a day two kind of thing, where you have to first get your initial risk plan and your initial roadmap off the ground before you can test it.
Okay. Uh, mm, that's very valuable. Thank you for sharing your insights there, and that's a great way to end the episode. But before we end, I have one last recommendation to ask. So, if you
Okay.
want to give a recommendation for a book or a blog or a podcast or anything
Oh,
to our
yeah.
audience, what would it be?
So I'm going to give a couple, I guess, because it's hard to decide on
Sure.
just one. So I'm going to give one business and one personal. Uh, I think if you haven't read it yet, you should read the Phoenix Project. I feel like everybody in technology has read that already, but I would say read the Phoenix Project and go back and then actually listen to the goal. So a lot of people have listened in technology have read the Phoenix Project, which is based on the goal, but they haven't actually gone back to the source, which is the goal.
Hmm.
There's a lot of good stuff to get there. And so again, being operationally focused, I think uh, security can a lot of times be a byproduct of
Hmm.
just good operations and good sound business and technology practices. So I think
Practices, yeah.
showing up your operations is a great way to help security. So I think for anyone looking to help scale and be more efficient in their security programs and technology programs, it's a great book. Um,
Okay.
Personally, I would recommend Anna Karenina. I don't know if anyone here is reading Tolstoy or has read that, but it's I just read it this last year, and it really is just first book that I couldn't put down in many years. So great novel, some timeless truths in there, and yeah, Tolstoy is a great writer. How can you go wrong with that? So those would be my recommendations.
Okay, thank you so much for sharing too. So what we'll do is when we publish the episode, we'll tag these as well, so that our
Oh, great.
audience can go there and either buy the book or download the ebook and stuff like that
Yeah.
and read.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jesse, for joining, and it was lovely to speak with you and learn about more around hiring, more about the culture, more about keeping security talent and helping them grow as well. So
Yeah.
yeah, thank you so much for your insights.
Yeah. You bet. It was a pleasure. It's great speaking with you today. Really enjoyed
Yeah,
it.
absolutely. Thank you. And to our audience, thank you so much for watching. See you in our next episode.